Welcome back to Yahoo Finance's All Markets Summit, sponsored in part by Grayscale. I'm David Hollerith. A year ago, the Justice Department stood up the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team to effectively lead enforcement of crypto-related cases. Since then, the team has prosecuted cases ranging from crypto mixing services to scams, insider trading, and national security threats. Joining us now to discuss the team's role in shaping the market integrity of cryptocurrencies and how it balances that without thwarting innovation is Choi, Director of the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team. Young, thanks for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me, David.
So to start off, can you just tell us what is this team INSET? What does it do?
So the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team was set up by the Department of Justice to really be a one-stop shop of subject matter experts drawn from across the department. And the reason for that is because the department realized that there had been a situation in which we've seen digital asset criminal use evolve. Early days, it was darknet markets, and it was people buying and selling all sorts of contraband and narcotics on those darknet markets. And these days, we're seeing it pop up in every single type of criminal activity the department looks into. We really need to bring together those who've been working on this issue for some time in order to address the more cutting-edge issues that we're looking at. And so, as you mentioned, one of the focuses we have is to make sure that we are appropriately addressing the ecosystem, looking at mixers, tumblers, and exchanges, and other money laundering platforms that help facilitate that type of criminal activity. And we also want to basically up everyone's baseline game when it comes to digital asset prosecutions and investigations, because we're seeing it in ransomware, we're seeing it in frauds and thefts of all sorts. And we want to make sure that it's not just the specialists who have the tools necessary to fight and disrupt this type of criminal activity, but that prosecutors from throughout the department can have access to those tools, understand how best to use them, and know where the resources are throughout the department to help them in their fights and their cases.
Yeah, and you're speaking obviously to this prosecutor network that was recently announced. Right. And so I'm curious there, what does success look like for that?
I think, well, just to give you a little bit of background, the Digital Asset Coordinators Network is a dedicated network of 150 plus prosecutors drawn from across the department. That's the 94 U.S. attorneys' offices, as well as the different sections at Main Justice that deal with things such as national security issues, antitrust, environmental and natural resources crimes, and even in the civil division and the tax divisions as well. And the idea is to be able to have a network of prosecutors devoted to being the first line of defense in each of their offices. So in any investigation in which a digital asset or a cryptocurrency issue comes up, people will know where in their office to find the help that they need to understand these technologies and to stay abreast of all the developments that we're seeing in the ways in which those technologies can be abused by bad actors. So that's really what the network is about. And success for us is making sure that each prosecutor feels empowered and armed with the right tools, knows how to apply the authorities that we already have to combat these crimes, and realizes that each prosecutor realizes that for every investigation, there are going to be challenges. Digital assets is one that you can address using the tools that we have in many instances and just understanding the new ways in which we're applying them to a new problem set.
And how is prosecuting cases involving crypto different from other assets?
So I think there are a few technological aspects of cryptocurrency that make them pose certain challenges and also certain benefits to law enforcement. So I think the easiest thing to think about is public ledgers. For the most part, most of the cryptocurrency crime that we see still rely on public ledger technologies, in which case you have a ledger that is available. You can see all the transactions that anyone's ever had. Now, that is very useful in terms of trying to chase down the flow of funds for any criminal activity, but we still need to understand how to get behind the addresses that are on that ledger. We'll know that the transaction may be criminal, but who is actually behind that particular transaction, that particular address? And that's one of the tricky things about cryptocurrency, is that it has built in this sort of anonymity, pseudonymity factor, because it does not necessarily put a one-to-one on the address and the actual real person that's behind those types of transactions. These are also very cross-border in nature. So, an example I like to give is you might have someone who's a victim of a cryptocurrency crime in the United States. the bad actor might be in country number 2. They may be using infrastructure such as a cryptocurrency platform mixer that may be incorporated in country number 3 or registered there even, but the data is in country number 4, and the people who work for that platform may be in country number 5, and trying to deal with bringing together all the different sources of data that you really need to do, both off-chain and on-chain, in order to get to the bottom of who's behind criminal activity can be tricky, like it is in all cyber cases or cross-border investigations generally. And also that it's, these transactions are immutable and they're irreversible. That's one of the benefits to cryptocurrency in some instances, in that these transactions can oftentimes be relatively frictionless and quick. But it also means that if we identify a particular transaction as being criminal, we can't go to some centralized, financial institution and ask for that money to come back. That's not how the blockchain works. And so finding ways to deal with that and still be able to chase funds to places where we may be able to capture those criminal proceeds back and provide them to the victims is one of the challenges that we face in this area.
Right, in the decentralized area of crypto, which DeFi, it's a broad term, it can mean a lot of different things. It's one of the most promising areas, at least people working in the crypto industry say, but it's obviously a place that has been fraught with what you call security exploits this year, or hacks too. People sort of say they're the same thing, sometimes they're kind of slightly different. So I was sort of curious, given the amount of hacks we've seen, it seems like one every week this year, what is the responsibility of sort of the private sector versus the public sector in sort of reducing the level of exploits in crypto? And added to that, what do you think the root problem is?
I think what is going on here is that the crypto industry and DeFi in particular has really exploded in market cap and size over the past few years even. And so I think it's unprecedented in the amount that the industry has grown and the ways in which DeFi have evolved the technologies that have traditionally been used in a variety of different ways, but now are being used to create financial products that in sophisticated multi-chain, means. And so I think especially in these cross-bridge hack situations, which is what you're alluding to, the bottom line is that the industry is still, in our view, in a maturation phase. In a lot of respects, we're looking at companies and hoping that they will understand that doing things such as basic risk reduction, having robust compliance programs, and ensuring that they are decreasing the opportunities for these type of exploits on their own platform is sort of the first best line of defense. And I think, a lot of these exploits as we see them are situations in which the code is exploited in part because maybe there would have been, if there had been more robust code audits, for instance, people might have caught these particular opportunities for exploitation before the code gets pushed out writ large. And so in those situations, we're hoping that people will now see every week we have multi-million-dollar exploits along those lines. People will start trying to think about ways in which they're making their code more robust before it's pushed out. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and what does a partnership look like between the private sector and public sector in sort of enabling more security auditing, I guess, before code's pushed out? Because obviously this is a fast-moving industry.
Yeah, I think it's a recognition that we have to work with the private sector and ensure that they understand the ways in which we've identified particular tactics that bad actors might be using in order to exploit these types of platforms. I think generally there is an understanding that every single week, if you see a new one of these, perhaps people within the industry are going to think twice before pushing out code and invest more in the front end auditing and basic sort of cybersecurity concerns that we see, as a general matter that we have as an issue that recurs within the private sector. I mean, I think people are now in a mindset where they realize that cybersecurity is a serious concern from a business risk perspective, and it requires investments on the front end from those who are responsible, not just sort of rushing to market with a particular product, but really making sure that you've kicked the tires on that product, and so that you're eliminating opportunities for bad actors. Especially, from our perspective, we're especially concerned with North Korean nation-state actors who seem to be behind a lot of these particular types of exploits and using them as a means to avoid a sanctions regime designed to limit their weapons of mass destruction program, for instance. I mean, these are serious national security concerns that really stretch beyond the fact that there are millions of dollars being stolen in single episodes that we see with DeFi hacks and exploits.
Yeah, the national security topic is obviously one thing, but if we're just thinking about for individual investors, to you, what is the most concerning digital crime trend or crypto crime trend that you've been following?
I think one of the things that we're particularly concerned about is that there's a lack of familiarity about the technology, but the average American consumer or investor might be looking at historically pretty significant returns on certain types of cryptocurrency or cryptocurrency investments. And so, it's a combination of fear of missing out, FOMO, plus a lack of familiarity in the technology that allows some investors to sometimes be duped by fraudulent schemes that are out there, that people who would abuse, the name of crypto and the promise of innovation, and quite frankly, participate in a series of old school Ponzi schemes or rug pulls or other types of thefts and frauds that happen with the American public. And I think, just sort of making sure that investors understand that they should be applying the same type of scrutiny that they apply to their normal investments in traditional finance to crypto it would go a long way. So if something sounds like it's too good to be true, maybe it is in fact too good to be true, like guaranteed high returns on investments without a real clear explanation as to what's going on. If you don't understand the technology and what exactly the product is doing, then perhaps try to do more research to figure out if this is the type of thing that you want to be investing in. And generally using your good sense in trying to make these decisions and not trying to be swept up in, the FOMO and the jargon that gets used in the crypto industry to make investment decisions that you might regret later on. I mean, there have been good returns in certain circumstances, but it's an incredibly volatile asset class. And so people need to be wary of that and think about that when they're actually investing in their overall portfolio.
Absolutely. Eun-Young, I thank you so much for coming to talk.
Of course. Thanks for having me.